Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Green Rush Live, our regularly scheduled cannabis business talk show that we do every Friday afternoon here on the Pro Cannabis Media Network. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. Always happy to have my pal Josh Kincaid as we go coast to coast. He's in Washington State, and I'm on the East Coast of in Massachusetts. And we're so happy to bring on a guy that I think a lot of people, anybody in the industry who doesn't know who George Jage is shouldn't be allowed in the industry. He's the founder of MJBiz and MJ Unpacked. George, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Well, that's very humbling introduction, Jimmy. It's always great to see you and Josh. I was not the founder of MJBiz. I took over when it was MJ Business Daily, and they did a trade show at a racetrack and did run it for a couple of years. But people get confused because I was the face of the company and built it up. But thank you.
And by the way, that's the second time I've done that same thing because it's assumed it's one of those like in law, they have de facto and then they have, the reality. And the reality is, George, you took it to a whole new level. That's another story. All right. I appreciate it. And I appreciate your humbleness and everything. Let's talk about MJ Unpacked in New York coming up in a few weeks. And how excited are you?
Oh man, super excited. Building a trade show and creating an event and it's really about, creating a community. It takes a little bit of time. It was really only about 18 months ago that we launched our first event, and everybody was texting me from Benzinga that everybody's saying that the three most important shows in the industry are MJBiz, MJ Unpacked, and Benzinga now, and have really kind of separated themselves, I think, from a lot of the smaller shows that are kind of servicing, these state markets, or going into early stage markets. But again, super excited. Like, you kind of have these catch fire moments, like when you finally convince people, like, hey, we've created something really exceptional here, and this is worth your time, and win those, kind of minds and hearts over and everything else. And it takes time. And we've got a great team of people. Obviously, Wendy from my team, my wife Kim, Morgan, Spencer, that are working their asses off every day to make sure that this is the best one yet. The timing, I think, couldn't be better. It's an event that obviously, we curate the audience so that it's executive level decision makers that are licensed operators. So it's not a bunch of people looking for a job or kicking tires. And we also let accredited investors in. But the time, so it's the right show, it's the right place, it's the right audience, the right people in the room. And we couldn't be more excited. But thanks for asking, Jim.
Is the Bang Gong going to be there?
Well, we actually took over more space at the New York Hilton. So the exhibit halls are in what they call the Americas Hall, and there's two floors kind of mirrored on top of each other. So we actually have two gongs this year.
Oh, two gongs. Oh my God.
So there'll be a gong on each floor. The gong's going to definitely be going. We always try to throw some kind of unique things in there to kind of, create a little bit of entertainment value. Got a few other tricks up my sleeve, but we'll let the attendees see it when they get the show site.
There you go. Josh, I know you got a bunch of questions. I'm going to let you take over for a few minutes here as I try to fight the nausea that I'm fighting right now. And that's not because either of one of you, I just don't feel well today. So go ahead.
Cannabis is good for that, Jimmy.
At 4:30.
That's actually where Jimmy and I met was there. So out in Vegas.
Right. Your first one.
Which kind of ties that all together, because it is one of those shows that will kind of seems to want to live for a lot longer than some of the other ones. CannaCon, for example, based in Seattle, not really relevant outside of Oklahoma. It seems like what we noticed early on with CannaCon was a pay-to-play system at the speaker level. You don't really see that too much at the successful levels. So the top three shows you mentioned are about value. And I think you've been able to do that, George, is offer value. It's kind of like that Gary V jab, right hook. It just comes naturally if you provide value. There's a lot of things that started in Seattle that are no longer here that I wish were, but they were more about how do I make money? And it's like, no, you have to offer value first, and then the money should follow. And if you're only looking at money, you're not going to be around very long. And that equation, unfortunately, is played out way too often. And that, I believe, is your secret sauce, and why the three of you, being Benzinga, MJ Unpacked, and MJBiz are leading the pack and kind of differentiating yourself.
Yeah, and listen, I'm not here to kind of put people down or anything else. And I think each event kind of has their own kind of unique flair and everything else. But yes, I mean, this is something that I am very critical of other events, that they're just in it to sell a booth and sell a ticket. I say that they're in the real estate business trying to sell 100 square feet at a time, not really care. And I mean, I built MJ BizCon, and I was hoping to, take that to a different level at one point, but, we parted ways. But I mean, that show is that way. I mean, they just care, like they had 125 packaging companies at the show. I mean, I highly, highly doubt that there was anybody in that organization that took the time to really assess, is there enough buying power coming in, looking for packaging, buyers that are coming to our show that would be able to create a good return on investment for them. And so, we did kind of, look at all the events out there. And I'm going to be honest, like we said, what sucks and what can we do different that would really resonate with people? We mail people's badges if they register early so they don't have to wait in line. I hate waiting in line. Jimmy hates waiting in line. Josh, you hate waiting in line. Our sales team doesn't ever say, hey, do you want to buy a booth? They say, what are your goals? What's your objectives? Like, I need to understand that, because I don't want to sell you a booth and then not be able to sell you another booth. It takes a long time to build a relationship in any industry, and certainly in cannabis. So we want to be able to maintain those relationships that we have delivered them value. And my wife and I that founded the company, I mean, we've, built other trade shows before. It's always got to be customer value first. Like if you create that value, you're going to create a very successful business, and it can never be the other way around. If you go in it saying, how can I just, get them to pay money? I mean, and I'm not pointing fingers at anybody specifically in the cannabis industry, but, I've seen all the tricks. I've been in the trade show industry for 30 years. People will go out and, give free booths and speaking spots to these companies to make it seem like they have all the star players at their event, but none of them actually buy in because they're not paying for it. And sometimes they don't even show up. It was years ago that there was an event out in California that had promoted Whoopi Goldberg was going to be speaking when she had her Whoopi and Maya line, and they actually never had her under contract. I know because Whoopi was $150,000. That included buying out a full airplane for her to fly on, because she doesn't like traveling with other people. So, it's important to understand what are the needs of the market at the moment. And we approach, creating a trade event as a hospitality event and as a community event. And so, we want this to live beyond that. And we're in the connection business. We're not in the real estate business. Like, you guys connecting at our show, makes me exceptionally happy, because, like, look at this. You guys are collabing. You guys got this going on. It's amazing to see how it's kind of like the butterfly flapping its wings, creates a tornado down the road. You never know how those connections are going to flourish. And when we design the event too, it's like, you're not going to build a relationship walking down an aisle, but if we have a lot of soft seating and you feel like you can sit down and have a conversation with somebody and get to know them, build trust, you build a relationship, then you do business together. And you can't do it if you online and virtual events, or walking down an aisle and grabbing a squishy ball on a business card.
Yeah. Hey, I do want to mention another trade show that is near and dear to my heart, because it's in my region of New England, and it's NYC. Mark Shepard's done an amazing job over the years.
Mark is a great organizer. I have a lot of respect for Mark. He and I are good friends. We talk often and chat shop, and he's really built a big event. I mean, he's like ourselves. We've gone out and done events that maybe haven't been as great as we want. Mark has that NYC in New England. It is the event for the New England market, period, hands down. Nobody can touch him. He's gone out to like Reno years ago and tried to do stuff in these other markets to kind of expand his business, and I know that's tough. Because you got to start, you're really building another show. Kind of like if you have a brand in Washington and you want to go open one up in Oregon, you got to start from the bottom and build that tower up.
Right. Absolutely. Go ahead, Josh. I know you get something. I gave him something else.
I was going to just rip on the whole business and networking everything, because I think that's also kind of what separates some people. MJ BizCon, they have the High Times party, and there's a lot of people, especially just after the last MJ BizCon, where a lot of people were putting out surveys asking, why do you go? And the majority of people are like, I go for the parties. Mm-hmm. So you're getting a totally different crowd than you would see at MJ Unpacked, who.
But that goes back to the value comment you brought up before, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So you got to understand like the economics too of the industry and the psychology of the industry. So all of the supply chain purchasing decisions start at the apex of the ladder, which is the cultivators, the brands, and the retailers. Any of those companies that are exhibiting at the supply side shows like MJBizCon need to have those people who are going to control the money being spent down into the ecosystem to create returns on investment. They lost control of their event in 2018. The parties, the suites, the private dinners became way more important. So the key decision makers go out to Vegas for MJ Biz, but they don't really go to the show anymore. And that's creating a decreasing return on investment for a lot of the companies that spend money with them, and they keep raising their prices.
Yeah, well, they're in a business. And speaking of business, when I get out and I actually talk to people, interview people on this show, other shows, I always hear the same thing. People who know, there are people in the cannabis industry who know cannabis, and there are people in the cannabis industry that know business, but that cannabis business person is evolving. Now, George,
Yes.
You are one. I can tell you that. You're definitely one. How do you see the actual business? Because there's a lot of doom and gloom out there right now in the industry.
Yeah. Well, fortunately or unfortunately, I've had experience going through this before. I mean, as far as me having that, cannabis business experience, I mean, that was when, pretty much from when I was like 15 to like 21, where I had my herbal distribution business. Right. I mean, it is important. I do see that kind of meritage where you need to bring together some people that understand it's not just the plant. You need to understand the science of the plant, but the culture of the community, right? And who are the customers, and why are people choosing this as a lifestyle choice or as a medical choice? And you do need somebody that knows how to run the business too, and keep the lights on. So it is important. I mean, it can be two different people that come together. I run a business with my wife. There's a great book called actually I just finished. It's called Rocket Fuel, and it talks about how you need to have. You don't want to marry somebody like yourself, and you don't want to go into business like somebody yourself. You're gonna be looking in the mirror, and you're gonna be in an echo chamber every day, right? So you need to have kind of multiple mindsets and perspectives to create successful enterprise. Absolutely, and hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, no, it answers it because we're in the middle of it. There's not going to be a day that we all wake up and the cannabis industry is going to be accepted. I don't care if it's legalization involves lawyers and politicians. That's just not going to happen for a long time because, well, we know why. Let's not get into that. But it's normalization. It's like, hey, this industry is here now. They're making billions of dollars. People are in it, even though it's all cash. And even though every single thing.
Double-digit CAGR every year. It's double-digit growth for our industry. And part of it is new markets coming online. I mean, think of the growth that New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Maryland, and all these states that are moving to adult use are what impacts that can have. It is a fast growth industry, but I just had this conversation with an old friend. Actually, I'm just going to share a little story here real quick because it's important, personal to me. There's a guy in the trade show industry named Peter Nathan, and he was like the godfather of the trade show industry. He's been doing it for like 50 years. He did the first ever trade show in Libya, in Cuba. He's a legend, and he just passed away about a month ago. And he was always just, kind of like a very much of a business father figure to me. I just talked to his daughter last night, and she's thinking about getting back into the event space, maybe even the cannabis event space. And I explained to her, like, there's such a lack of access to capital in the industry. And she goes, I'm so surprised. I'm so surprised. Like, everybody's so excited about cannabis. It's growing all the time. Like, why is there this lack of access to capital? Right. And it really is a complete and abject failure of government, that they have, that we don't have access to safe banking, which creates a bullshit, perceived risk on these businesses. It's actually a public safety issue. People get shot here in Washington, Josh, as working a $15 an hour retail job. I mean, get the fuck out of our way, pardon my French, but, hopefully this is a R-rated show. But get the fuck out of our way and just get safe banking across the transom. Don't attach it to 20 other, social equity, provisions, expungement. Let's just get to safe banking because it is a critical, it's going to save lives, period. Right. Create some efficiency in the ecosystem, but it's going to also, increase the opportunity for investor confidence. And you'll see, major U.S. exchanges moving to start, listing. Maybe it's the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ, but they're never going to do it if there's no safe banking. And we need institutional capital. We need private equity. We need the angel investors to see that we're just about to get there, so they start opening up their wallets and purse strings. And the venture funds, I don't know, they might have run their course in this industry because they made a lot of place bets early on. Very few of them have had round trips, for their investors. So they're very, strained to be able to raise more money. If they have any money, they're saving it to, support companies they've already invested in so that they don't go to zero. We're seeing it all over the place. And it's just, listen, we might see a couple MSOs, fail on their debt, default on their debt, and they're going to go down. Now, that doesn't mean that the industry is not healthy. It doesn't mean the industry is not growing. It might mean that something was mismanaged or over leveraged. And when something's over leveraged and the interest rates go up and capital dries up, you get yourself in a little bit of trouble. So anyway, sorry for the rant. I'm beside myself that we don't have, the industry leadership or, the government leadership to solve a very, very, very simple problem.
Yeah.
But doesn't that also provide some opportunities? Because there's a report out from Viridian Capital, right? So they came out and said that the capital raises dropped from 12 billion in 2021 to 4 billion in 2022. And so I'm thinking that with the lack of capital, that actually might create more opportunities for, just M&As, mergers, so that you might have two zombies like Hexo and Tilray holding each other up, and it's just a matter of time before they finally fall into their grave. But at least it does provide an opportunity to maybe breathe and live another day.
Yeah, and I think this type of economic contraction. I mean, this is just how capital markets work and marketplaces work. There's going to be expansion and contraction. Agriculture is going to have droughts, and the price of bananas are going to go up. From time to time. This is, a lot of people have been saying this is like the .com bubble bursting in the late 90s. And it will eliminate, poorly managed, poorly capitalized companies. Companies that don't deliver value are going to probably really struggle. And I think that it also does create, kind of a pathway and a demand for collaborative work like you guys are doing, right? Media is tough. Events, publishing, podcasting, there's a lot of media content out there, and there's not a lot of advertisers. So you need to be best of class, and you'll survive and probably thrive. But if you're just kind of doing the same old and not innovating or collaborating or partnering or finding a way that 1 + 1 can equal 11, I think it's going to be a tough road, and we're probably 6 to 12 months before things start really turning.
Man, that's actually great advice. Believe me, great insight on that. Now, I got a question for you, and actually, Josh and I worked on this one together. Okay, and if you had to pick one of the big three conglomerate industries that are out there, you've got your alcohol, your pharma, and your big tobacco. Which one do you think will end up either operating in the cannabis space, or will it be a combination of all three? What's your feeling about that?
Well, I listen, I'm not on the front lines of a lot of, what's happening on what is it, D Street or J Street with all the lobbyists in Washington. But, you have to believe that, it's in their advantage to have the industry strained and desperate, so that when they can move into the space on a federal legalization, it's, instead of paying $10 for something, they're paying $5. I think that pharma's got a pathway. I mean, in this space, my mother-in-law worked for Johnson & Johnson for decades, and so she lives out in Jersey and kind of that pharma kind of corridor out there. Pharmaceuticals tend to want to extract the intelligence and leave the wisdom. And so we find something that might be of medical benefit or value, and we want to isolate it, and we want to get it into a pill form, and then we want to make it so that it's not, somebody else can copy it. I mean, this is medicine that is available that we can grow in our backyard. I'm not pointing to my backyard. There are no marijuana plants in my backyard, officer. All right. So, and tobacco, I mean, listen, they've got the technology stacks, they've got the plans. And I think tobacco is probably going to be a stronger force coming to this industry for the sake that I think they're the weakest. They're most susceptible to, continuing having challenges of finding and addicting new customers. And the alcohol industry, you know, I've good friends back in my home state of Wisconsin. Yeah, you know, you betcha that, you know, they're selling Delta 8 beverages all day long at their bar. And they're like, we're never going to get legal weed here because the tavern league is so strong. And we know that alcohol sales go down, you know, as soon as the legalization happens. So, you know, it's just, again, it's opposing forces. It's kind of like, you know, the privatizing prisons, again, one of the probably the worst ideas ever, but, you know, there's a lot of lobbyists that, you know, corporate lobbyists that can influence that to privatize prisons. And, you know, I think history will look back as that being one of the stupidest things that we've ever done, not to mention how over incarcerated our country is. But without going off on too much of a rabbit hole, I think that alcohol is probably best positioned. I think that tobacco is probably most motivated, and I think pharma is going to kind of take a little bit of a different path and probably try to fuck up something that nature made perfect to begin with.
That's a great quote, by the way, George. That's a great quote. All right.
You caught me on a Friday. It's been a long week. I'm just going to let it hang out today, Jimmy.
No, I love that. And I appreciate you. I know you moved some things around so we could hang out and talk for a little bit, because I've always enjoyed our chats over the last few years. You used the word collaboration, and it is a word that this industry still struggles with. There is a lot of backstabbing. There's a lot of bullying going on in this industry. I'm talking basically in the Massachusetts area, just because these are the stories that I hear a lot of. Yes, there's some MSOs involved with that, but my point is, how is the industry going to survive if we get childish with our philosophies and we start to backbite and bully others that are in it for the reason that you just said? This is a medicine. You want to help people. There are a lot of people out there in this industry who just want to help people feel better.
Yeah. You know, I mean, listen, and Josh, you've been around a long time. I mean, there's a lot of backstabbing and you know, ankle biting that goes on in the industry. You know, some people like MSOs are the devil. You know, they're not. And I saw a really interesting post. It's like, you know, like they're complaining about the MSOs having too much power or money, and like somebody quoted said, like, what are you going to do when InBev comes in, right? They're going to be, you know, 20, 30x, you know, more powerful than any MSO that exists today. Yeah, I mean, listen, I mean, maybe we all just need to have a group therapy session and smoke some weed and talk about how we're going to get along better.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, weed kind of has that effect on people, right? Like you go out and get drunk, you want to fight, and when you smoke a joint, you want to love.
Right.
So this is why it can be so transformational for society, right? Like, I mean, we're going to reduce some of the physiological harm that alcohol causes on the body. We can reduce some of the societal harm that violence that stems from, you know, overuse or overconsumption of alcohol causes. You know, deaths. I mean, I'm not encouraging anybody to drive stoned, but, you know, I mean, drunk drivers are probably more impaired than a cannabis driver who might be driving a little too slow, where the you know, alcohol is going to make one drive too fast. Still a bad idea to drink and under or drive under the influence of anything. I just want to make that clear. But you know, hopefully we can see some reduction in damage. And Jimmy and Josh, I mean, we're focused on the cannabis industry. I mean, when you look at the restorative power of hemp and the way that it could absolutely radically transform so many major industries that are the primary contributors to our, you know, global extinction threat called climate change. You know, we can use hemp to restore soil that's been, you know, toxified. We can use it to, you know, it's a natural, easy growing plant that can be used for fuel. It can be used for textiles. It can be used to create bioplastics that truly biodegrade. Man, I wish we could get the capital behind that, and people would see, you know, maybe like an ExxonMobil, after they made, you know, $62 billion in profit last quarter, could invest into something around the hemp space.
Yeah. Hemp needs a better marketing agent like ChatGPT or AI is getting right now, and it would do a lot better.
Yeah.
Hey, George, I just so appreciate, I know that Josh and I and you, we could talk for at least an hour, but I really, as much as I'd love to do that, I'm not sure I'm going to make it much past the next few minutes. So I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going to tease what's happening over the next hour and a half on the show. Brandon Jones, our correspondent from Missouri, has a bunch of interviews that he's done this week. Missouri's market is just exploding, and he's going to take over the rest of the show. And of course, following this show is our weekly Weed Talk News show. So, George, best of luck at MJ Unpacked. Josh, thanks for being there and being my crutch today. I really appreciate it. I know people are saying, he doesn't look sick. I'm pretty nauseous right now. That being said, everybody have a great weekend, everybody. And we definitely will have a very special 421 show next week. And we'll get into that if you tune in. So again, thanks for watching the really live part of the Green Rush Live. And from here on in, we're live streaming, but it is recorded content. We'll see you next time.
Jimmy, Josh, thank you guys so much.
It's a whole new world of weed out there, isn't it? Everyone is learning new ways to titrate, ingest, consume, imbibe, and engage with this plant medicine we call cannabis. Hi, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and the host of In the Weeds, and once in a while, the really live business cannabis talk show we call Green Rush on Friday afternoons from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern. Now, let me tell you my cannabis story. You know, I've had 4 major surgeries in the past 23 years and suffer from osteoarthritis with a variety of metal parts in my body and one on deck. Now, thanks to those chronic pain issues, I've been a medical patient in Massachusetts for almost 10 years now. I remember my first trip to a dispensary just outside of Boston, and I told the bud tender I didn't want to smoke it anymore, so I tried edibles, then tinctures, then vaping, and now, if I'm going to smoke, I only use the Weegits filtration system. What? The Weegits.com, Weegits, that's weed, W-E-E-D, G-E-T-S.com, is where you'll find the planet's coolest product that cools the smoke from everyone's favorite flower. Now, the guy that started this was a pretty good medical device manufacturer, and he created this maze pipe that cools the smoking process from 1300 degrees Fahrenheit upon inflammation down to just 90 degrees when it reaches your mouth. That's right, 1300 down to 90. That's why this maze pipe is amazing. So here's how it works. You start with that glass bowl, you flame on, and then you inhale nice and smooth so the smoke goes through 3 different filtration and cooling systems. Now, if pre-rolls is your thing, you can use the Weegits filter that a pre-roll fits into perfectly. That's right, or even a chillum. The more filters, the smoother the draw. Best of all is the price. You can get all this, or one or the other, for just a few bucks. It'll cool your smoke and you'll give your lungs a break. Now, add in the code of PCMTV and you get 15% off. So just go to Weegits.com and check out the best way to enjoy a cooler smoke with less coughing and hacking and more peace of mind. All that resin and tar is collected in the polyurethane filters that are easy to clean with soap, water, and a few Q-tips. Your lungs will thank you, and so will I.
As a broker, we have access to many, many cannabis carriers. So I will go in with 2 or 3 quotes for people. The quotes might be $20,000 for one, $22,000 for another, $17,500 for another. Pretty close among the 3. What I tell people is it's not the pricing, it's what's included and not included, meaning exclusions. An exclusion in layman's terms is just something that's not included. It's not on the menu. So it's just not included. But if you don't know that, if no one shows you that on page 71 of a 150-page policy, You're not going to know. No one knows. I never met one person that says they read an insurance policy. If you do, I got some property in Florida for you.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
So the reality of the matter is, big banks and small banks are going to be different in a lot of ways, and they're both going to have their advantages and disadvantages. For a business like cannabis, you really have to have an integral knowledge of that business and a real granular knowledge of that business and the players involved in it. And that's why if you look at the banks that are successful to play in this space in Massachusetts, they are smaller banks that are very heavy, intensified personal touch, human communication, where you don't get a lot of that with the bigger banks.